All right, Jesse, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming. It's been a long time coming. You were on my list, my short list for season one guests, and then we
Mm-hmm.
finally managed to book a time. So I'm pretty happy
Hmm.
to have this chat with you. So yeah, thanks for
Yeah.
making it out.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be here. It's just like catching up with friends. So
Yeah. Most of my episodes are just basically catching up with friends and stuff.
yeah.
So it's a good excuse to just chat.
Mm-hmm.
So by now I would have already read your bio, so they know that you're really big into karate, PT, dance.
Mm-hmm.
Those are like the main trifectas of what
Mm-hmm.
it seems like you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just go over like how we met. So we met on Koreos in like 2019 when I joined,
Mm-hmm.
and that was firework. And we danced together for about 2-ish years for firework and mega stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So that was like until the very start of COVID, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And we've done a few covers, which we'll show in a second. Um, you're also a Disney enthusiast,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, doctor of PT, and you're part of Team USA Karate.
Mm-hmm.
Any other clarifications or stuff that you're up to?
Mm, sounds about right. I think a pretty good summary. So
Yeah,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
nice. All right, so let's start off with the videos that we have prepared. Just a few seconds. This is the Jesse that I know, or that's the one that I met.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. This is Black Swan BTS in the mall, no shoes, public. Security coming in the background eventually. And we learned this pretty fast. It was like one practice.
Yeah, we had like one
Wait,
practice,
one.
1 hour. I
Yeah,
think,
one
too.
one practice, 1 hour. I'm like, wow, that was actually pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Given the dance isn't crazy hard, but
Mm-hmm.
still very impressive
Mm-hmm.
because like it just came out.
Yeah, it like just came out and just trying to align the schedules. I think that's why we had the 1 hour, one practice.
Yeah.
And the official cover, we also filmed like one take
Yeah, like
within an hour too.
yeah, within an hour, it really
Yeah.
was like a couple takes, and we were
Mhm.
like on a time crunch too.
Yeah. But I thought it was a pretty stacked like roster for
Yeah.
it, and it was really fun. And I think it was like our first time dancing together too.
Mm.
So it was like really just fun to do. So,
Yeah, definitely. Same with Jordan. Jordan was like, I think it was our first cover that I danced with him too. So it was kind of fun.
Yeah.
All right, second one. Yeah. Yeah, so I just put this one because I'm in the background.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm doing.
Oh, I love the outfit.
I know,
Oh,
outfit
it's
change.
so good.
This is fun. We're just driving around LA.
Yeah.
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 Cool. More solo.
Yeah.
You're Jimin, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
But yeah, I'm seeing a recurring theme. We obviously are 2 out of 2 covers are BTS.
Yes.
I think we're BTS fans.
Yes, we are.
I was telling some of the newbies that like except for one subunit, I've been in every BTS cover that we've had. So if they have a comeback and we do, I'm like gonna cast so hard for that. I'm like, I
Yes.
need to not break my streak.
Yeah, you had to maintain that streak.
Exactly.
Who would you ideally want to cast for?
I don't know. Like, I don't really have a BTS bias, but typically, like, I like Jungkook Sparks because he has usually like the chorus, the dance parts. So I'm like, okay, yeah. Usually someone else will be Jimin, and then,
Mhm.
but by volume, I've been J-Hope the most,
Mm-hmm.
which I'm fine with too because he's a dancer. But
Right.
I think those are my two.
Yeah.
And you'd be Jimin, right?
I think
You're hard
so. I
Jimin.
think I just really like his dance style a lot, and so I don't. It really depends on the group who I cast for.
Yeah.
It depends on like, oh, I want to be that person, or I'd rather someone else take that role and do it better than me. So it
Mhm.
really just depends. But for BTS, I always like to be Jimin because
Yeah.
I feel like I mesh with his style pretty well.
Yeah.
too.
I mean, who is a better Jimin than Jesse?
I don't know.
Nice. All right, ready to go into our main topics? Okay, so as normal, usually I'll go into like origin story of like my guest. So
Mhm.
basically, like what's your background? Where did you grow up? Maybe
Mhm.
family dynamics. Are you from OS or SoCal? Like born and raised, or were you somewhere
Born
else?
and raised in Torrance, and I've
Nice.
basically lived there all my life.
Dang,
So
you're native born and just you're there.
yeah, that's why I'm terrible with cold weather and
Yeah,
everything.
you're California for
Yeah.
sure.
Mhm.
SoCal.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. And then so yeah, like anything that you want to like any main influences or important things that can connect the dots for like who you were growing up, family dynamics influences that like led you to where you are today.
I grew up with both my parents in a Christian household. My mom's side of the family lived really close by, so I was always really close with my cousins, my grandparents, my aunts and uncles. My dad's side is actually from San Francisco, and they stayed there. He came down for college, and that's how he met my mom.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. They actually met through martial arts, which is why I probably ended up
Mm.
kind of in the route that I ended up with. But just a lot of um, kind of God as like the focus and just relying on the plan that He has for us. I think that's kind of like been my driving force throughout everything that I've kind of achieved in life. And just having family support behind everything I do is basically why I can do what I do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
nice. So you did both your parents do karate, or was it something else? Or
Both of my parents did karate in university,
okay.
and then my mom continued it after university. My aunt and my uncle were actually my first senseis. So
Mm,
it was like a family thing. I
yeah.
think my grandparents both did it. Majority of my aunt and uncles did it. All my cousins did it at one point.
Mm.
I think I'm the one that just stayed the
You're the
longest.
stay
And I,
longest. Like
yeah,
I'm
it
still
just
here,
kind of,
guys.
yeah, I'm like, where are you guys at, you know?
Yeah.
But it's really nice too because even when I meet up with my cousins, they're like, oh, JJ, like, I want to practice again. Can we just like come by the dojo sometime? So it's kind of nice that it's still like that foundation for us
Yeah,
too.
like family
Yeah.
thing.
Hmm.
So what was I gonna say? Karate. And you're an only child,
Only
right?
child.
Okay, yeah.
Hmm.
That's what I thought. I just want making sure.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
That's pretty cool. Like my family too. Like my both my parents did martial arts
Hmm.
growing up, so naturally my sister and I got into it as well.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I talked about that in another episode of the podcast. But yeah, they
Hmm.
were super big into martial arts, like basically just fighting. And
Yeah, yeah,
then
yeah.
they also both dance, but maybe that's just a Filipino thing.
Oh.
So I think like this whole running in the family thing makes a lot of sense, especially
Yeah.
when you start early, I guess.
Hmm. Yeah. Because I
Um,
started really early, and so it just kind of kept going. Yeah.
mm. So then I think in your bio you said you started at like 5 or something like that, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So then how did well, I guess growing up from 5 until like you started to do this like more seriously,
Hmm.
was it was that always like your kind of career or life journey, or did it kind of just evolve into something that grew into a passion, or
Hmm.
did you have any other career aspirations kind of growing up in that sort of, time period?
Hmm. Because I started so early and my family was really involved, it was only like a one time a week thing. And it was just like good exercise, self defense, family gathering,
Yeah.
and it was like family bonding. It stayed like that for a majority of my like up to middle school, I think. And that's when we had like a training camp where our organization had several dojos within the California area and maybe some from South America as well. And we all like came and did like a large training camp at the home dojo. And so I met up with some students that were like my age from another studio, but within the same organization. And I was like, oh, Team USA is like a thing, for
Mm,
our sport. And I didn't realize that because I've just always done it just for like health and for exercise. And so I started kind of researching a little bit more in like the competition aspect. I'm like, wait, this is actually really cool and something I wanted to do. But for the longest time, it was just like, I want to be healthy, I want to
mm,
exercise, it's good self defense, and I'm here because I've made friends along the way. But not that I didn't have times of burnout too. I
mm,
think there was times where I was just like, oh, I want to try other things in life, or maybe I just want to focus on school. I never thought I would take it to the level that I'm at right now. So sometimes I wonder if I was like that purple belt that was just doing it in the backyard of my aunt's place, like
mm.
how she would react to what I've done with it too.
I
Yeah.
see. So then it more just kind of evolved into like the passion that it had that you have in it like right now. It wasn't kind of like the initial starting point.
Hmm.
So then at that point, you said in middle school were kind of like exposed to a little bit more.
Hmm.
What was your kind of life trajectory at that point? Like, what did you imagine yourself doing at that point moving
Hmm.
forward?
At that point, I just thought I was gonna continue it in maybe, and you know what? I think I said middle school. I meant high school.
Okay, high school.
But
Gotcha.
yeah, but in high school, I think I just wanted to be on like junior team and just wanted to compete, and that was just like the initial goal, and just keep up with it. Like I didn't think too much about it in terms of like long term. Like, am I gonna do this 5 years from now? Am I gonna do it from 10 years from now? It's just like the goal was like I wanted to be on Team USA and I wanted
Mm,
to compete for my country.
mm,
And so I think the longer I did it, the more I realized how much I enjoyed being in that role. And then it continued to like evolve into something new with each year.
mm.
Hmm.
Um, so how did you was there like a turning point or maybe a thought that made you feel like you could do Team USA? And I asked that because maybe like a lot of people get into sports and activities in high school, middle school, whatever,
Hmm.
and to aim for a goal like representing the country,
Hmm.
did you feel like that there was something inherent about you that you felt like you could make it there, or was it kind of the environment or like maybe the guidance and like affirmations of the people around you like, oh, you can definitely do it, or
Hmm.
what made you feel like you could aim in that direction? Is it? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Let me think about that. There's like a few aspects to I think how I ended up approaching that dream in general or that goal because when I had first brought that idea up to one of my senpais, she was actually on the senior team at the time,
Okay.
and so I was like asking for some guidance. And unfortunately, at the time, she was like, "Oh, by the time you learn the rules, the systems, and all the forms, you'll probably be too old for junior
Oh.
team." And I was a little disheartened from that
Okay.
answer, you know. So, of course, like, my parents were there when we had that conversation too, and they're like, if you can do anything, you can put your mind to it. We're behind you, maybe we just need to find you the right person who's going to support you. And so it ended up being someone still in our organization, but just like a different teacher. And that was also the same sensei that had girls around my age that were also shooting for that goal. So then it was like putting me in an environment that had like-minded like thinking and the support system to elevate me to the next level and be like, yeah, you totally can do it. You just need to learn this. The rules, they change all the time, so it doesn't matter, like you can learn it as you go and we'll get you there. So it was definitely like the right environment, the right people, and of course like my family being there to be supportive. So
Nice. I like
yeah.
that. And so my next question is, was there something inherently about you, I guess your natural inclinations or I don't know, physical genetic abilities or mindset that you feel like lends yourself to being successful in a sport like karate?
um
Or is it just a lot of hard work, discipline, and then like you said, the right environment?
I think there is a balance between skill, talent, and hard work. There's that phrase that says that hard work hard work beats talent when talent fails to do hard work,
Mhm.
right? And so I think I have good genetics that help in that like in that essence, because I can move well, I can learn and pick up quickly, and I can try to implement things when I'm given corrections. But it's also at that point, everyone gets good. Everyone is good at that level that you want to be at when you go to international. So at that point, it becomes just consistency. Who shows up, who believes in themselves more, and like who just has a better day sometimes. And that at that point it becomes the hard work and the consistency. So at that point, yeah, everyone's skilled, everyone has talent, but who's gonna work the hardest and like outwork the rest?
Mm,
So
I
yeah.
see.
Hmm.
And I guess another thing is I've met a lot of people in high school and let's say when we were younger
Hmm.
that also did sports and let's say like karate or taekwondo or something like that.
Hmm.
And they'll do it and they'll get a black belt or whatever degree. And
Hmm.
then maybe in college it kind of falls off.
Hmm.
And it feels like that's like a 80-20. Like most people, that's the route, right? And then
Hmm.
they just kind of stop and they do whatever else afterwards.
Hmm.
I guess you might have already answered this, but were there any other factors you can point to that led you to just continuing beyond the point where everyone else normally falls
Hmm.
off?
Yeah. So I would also say that like my junior team career had a lot of ups and downs. So the first year that I made the team, we were a trio team competing in a synchronized form. I didn't make it for individual. But the next year I made it for synchronized form and individual. And that same year was the first time I won my first international individual title. And then the following year after that, I didn't make team at all for
Mm.
individual. So there's a lot of like ups and downs where I did really well and then I would have some like setbacks as well. And it was during those times that I was trying to work myself from that failure or that setback. And that's where you find your true grit and your true purpose in that sense. Cause I was like, I don't like being in this area of like self pity and stuff like that. Like, I want to work harder so that I can make it again. And I think like resilience has always been kind of like my life theme especially in karate. So every time I had that setback or some performance didn't go the way I wanted to, I was able to build myself back up. We have a phrase in our dojo, or it's a Japanese phrase, but 7 times down, 8 times up.
Mm.
Every time you get knocked down, you get back up and do it again. Work yourself way like towards that goal. And so that was the main thing. I think that first set of not making USA individually and then trying to get back up again.
Mm.
Yeah.
I like that. I think that underscores a very important point that maybe people don't know or don't get exposed to until they hit the adversity,
Mm-hmm.
but that adversity is almost a necessary ingredient for that greater success than you normally would have
Mm-hmm.
because it shows like the way you handle that, the resiliency, and that
Mhm.
allows you to bounce. It's like the metaphor of pulling back a boat, right? Like you
Mhm.
can't really shoot forward if you don't pull it back, and that's
Mhm.
how life kind of goes.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm,
And I think a lot of times, when people take that, or at least for me personally, I didn't really take that gap in college just because I felt like I was on that uphill climb. Like I was starting to like peak, not necessarily peak, but I was learning more about
mm,
myself. I was understanding how to be a better athlete, how to be a better coach too at the same time. And then that made me want to learn more. So a lot of times, yes, people do maybe quit after a black belt or something like that. But we always say, at least in our studio, in our dojo, that the black belt is actually the starting
starting point.
point because you learn all the basics and the foundations, and now you can actually explore what you love about the sport, what makes you special compared to like other people too, not just like blindly following the moves, but your own interpretation. What feels good to you, what expresses yourself the best. So I think that was my turning point too.
I like that. That's crazy. It's like, oh, you've earned your black belt. It is just the beginning, and
Yeah,
that's
I
pretty
know.
much it, right?
Yeah, it's
It's
like
like,
the new white belt.
I think that's the same thing with school or anything that you go through.
Mhm.
Is you think that the end of your education is it, but
Mhm.
that's just the beginning.
Mhm.
Or at least that's how you should approach it.
Mhm.
So now I guess moving forward, two other things I wanted to touch on in this section was like,
Mhm.
how does dance come to play in this, and then also
Mm.
PT. So
Yeah.
those we can start anywhere for either of those topics, but how did those play a role in like this journey?
Hmm. I guess I'll start with PT because with any sport, injuries are going to be,
What?
it's gonna happen
What?
whether it's intent, like
Yeah.
it's definitely never intentional, but you can do all the right things, something just happens, right? That's why they're called accidents. And a lot of my injuries come because I do a very repetitive sport.
Mm.
So it was like just like wear and tear, a little bit of tendonitis here and there and stuff like
Just
that, or
tendonitis,
just
whatever,
like,
Yeah.
you sprain an ankle, roll it funny in practice and
Yeah.
stuff like that. And I just had a couple of injuries during high school at the same time. And so I had initially gone to the doctor, and because my mom's a nurse practitioner, we have like a very heavy like medical background. So it was like, okay, yeah, take some rest or you need to stop, right? And I remember hearing the word stop, and I was like, you want me to stop my sport? I just can't.
Yeah.
I was like preparing for junior world championships at the time. I was like, I can't stop. Like, can you tell me how to fix this, right? And then at the time, the place that my mom was working at had a PT clinic next door, and they're like, oh, why don't you try like PT? Maybe they can give you a different insight. I was like, oh, PT. And it was so interesting to me that I honestly had never even thought of it. It just wasn't like on my radar at all. And so I went to the clinic. They like said, okay, yeah, let's take it easy a couple weeks, but let's do these kinds of exercises that are gonna get back you on your feet. And then they just kind of helped me through the whole thing. And then I felt better than ever. And I just like fell in love with the whole process. Like, okay, yeah, you can take medication if you need it, you can take injections and stuff like that. But it was just curing the injury, or not necessarily curing the injury, but helping the injury through movement.
Mm,
And like, let me keep you moving, let me keep you in motion. Let's not stop. Let's just adjust things so that you can still do what you want to do without having to just like completely cut everything off. And so I fell into PT because of my own injuries,
mhm,
right? Because of my love for karate, it just led that way. And then I just talked to the owner. I was like, "Hey, is it okay if I like volunteer here for a little bit?
mm.
Like, it seems really interesting, and I kind of want to learn more." And so I just volunteered at the clinic, and then they hired me as an aide. Actually, shout out to Peak Orthopedic because they literally started my journey as a physical therapist, and that's where I work now too. So
Mm. That's crazy. So
yeah.
you were curious and you just volunteered and then got hired as an aide.
Mhm.
And then that kind of so then since then you've just fallen more deeply in love with that.
Mhm.
So then
Mhm.
how did the route to like PT school? I mean, I guess maybe that's self-explanatory, but you just decided to go and then
Mhm.
it was all super easy, right?
I guess yeah, it was like the easiest thing in the world. Oh no, so I guess it helped because originally I was like bio pre med, so I
Okay,
was in the
okay.
health medical
Gotcha.
medical field that I wanted to go into. So I had a lot of like prereqs done. At that point, I was like in preparing for like undergrad, and so when I made the switch though, I had changed my major and my focus to kinesiology.
Oh, okay.
So then, of course, I had to do more kinesio based courses, but at that point, the switch was easier because I've always wanted to go in the healthcare field,
Gotcha.
and just switching from doctor to physical therapist just because I wanted to have that more one-on-one interaction with my patients and try to help them through their injuries and their deficits through movement, not necessarily just kind of going like the route of like medication.
Yeah, like
So,
medical.
yeah,
Mm,
yeah. So that's kind of how it led to that.
okay.
Yeah.
And then what about like I don't really know how that process works, but like going for your doctorate, like is
Mhm.
it a separate from like your undergraduate and
Mhm.
then so then you had to apply and stuff like that. So what was
Yeah.
the process like, I guess, in a nutshell? Like
Mm. So
getting
after you finish, you do have to have like your undergrad degree, whatever it doesn't even have to be like in kinesiology. It could some people do their second career in like business, and then they just need to make sure you have your prerequisites, you have a good GPA. At the time, you had to take the graduate exam, the GRE, but they actually don't require that for a lot of schools now. So I think it just depends where you're applying. But then you're doing yeah. So you have your prereqs done, you have your exam done, and you just have your letters of rec, essays, submit it,
mm,
get in wherever you get in, and then it's another 3 years for your doctorate program. Some places have like an accelerated program where it's like 2 years, but mine was 3 years.
mm.
And so after you get your doctorate, you get your degree, you still have to take a board exam. And that is probably the hardest thing I've ever done in
Oh,
my life.
okay.
It's like a 6 hour exam.
Dang.
And I don't even remember how many questions it was at this time, but it takes like a lot of dedication to study for that and study for the way you're supposed to take the exam. It's a little
Mm,
different than just treating clinic wise. But that's how you end up becoming like a physical therapist.
okay.
Yeah.
Do you have any at the top of your head biggest takeaways or lessons or reflections that you got from the whole process of getting your doctorate and now being a doctor of physical therapy?
Mm-hmm. Don't be afraid to make mistakes and expose yourself to good mentors, because any question that you don't ask, somebody probably already has that same question. So if you ask it, then it helps the entire class. I think that was one of the things that I struggled with the first year, is just being like, oh, I'm going to make the wrong answer. I'm going to say the wrong thing. I'm going to do the wrong skill. But the more you put yourself out there, the more you can learn and be a better therapist, which is going to help your future patients way more.
Nice, I like that.
Yeah.
Last question on this is so now physical therapy and karate, how does that manifest in your life as like something that comes together that's two things that you're passionate about?
Mm. I think they go hand in hand completely. And I really love mentoring the next generation as well. So I think because I have more of that scientific like biomechanic approach and trying to do like preventative injury like programs for my students, it like it changes how I taught. It wasn't just like, okay, just do the punch.
Mm,
Like, okay, let's rotate your hips a little bit more. Let's get a little bit more angle of this so that you can lock your shoulder like this. It's I have a little bit more of a technical approach from PT, just so that I can try to preserve their joints and muscles as long as I can. So I think that affects that way. And then physical therapy, obviously, like I try to make sure I stay in my best
yeah.
health as well. um, Karate has a very unique way of movement too, because it's a more repetitive sport. I have like my own set of injuries, my own set of experience with like seeing injuries happen even right in front of me. So that gives me experience to kind of take back with my patients, and I understand like what like a torn labrum feels like. I know what a meniscus tear feels like because I have them myself, and I have it from a repetitive sport. So I can bring that to these patients that I have so that they can like understand that I know where they're coming from. I know what it's like to be down and like not be able to do anything, but you can like build yourself back up.
Mm,
Mm,
nice.
yeah.
I like that. Okay, so how does dance fit into this sort of life theme of Jesse?
Uh oh, dance. Like funny thing is that I remember I'll see if I actually keep this in. But I remember in middle school, like it was some of my friends were just watching like Girls' Generation, and then they were like dancing, and I was like, oh, I want to learn too. And I remember like one of the girls was like, why is she dancing? She doesn't look good dancing.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and
Sorry.
I
Catching
was like I
strays.
was like, dang. And I was like, okay, I'm never dancing
Yeah.
again in my life. And then a few years later, like in high school, like my friend introduced me to like J-pop, and then I started dancing again because I really liked the dance. And then, you always have that thing in the back of your head that's like, oh, she doesn't look good dancing,
Yeah.
right? But it was just one of those things, you know what? I enjoy it. who cares what other people say? And then in high school, I took it as like PE, and then eventually did some dancing during college, and then I also obviously went for choreos as well. And then it just taught me like how to enjoy a performance, even like, and it kind of transferred into karate because people always say that I look like I'm enjoying dancing more, and I understand like karate, like you have to have a fierce face, but like sometimes I look too stiff or like I'm like holding a lot of like stress in my body. But whereas like dance, you feel so free, and naturally I understand dance is going to be feel very freeing, but it allowed me to understand what creativity, self-expression, rhythm, timing, and I took that into karate. And then it just helped me to kind of apply that to just like general life. Like you need to be more adaptable. There's like a natural cadence to life too. So yeah.
I like that because it's like I had a friend on the show as well. Like he's a stunt guy,
Oh
right?
yeah,
But he
yeah,
also
yeah. Oh.
dances and like does film stuff. But it's kind of like another type of movement. And I
Mhm.
imagine someone who's like been a mover your whole life,
Mhm.
this is kind of like a different expression or avenue of movement. Because like
Mhm.
you said, like karate, there's a certain type of movement and flow and whatnot. But then
Mhm.
with dance, it's a completely different approach, but still movement.
Mhm.
So I imagine that would expand your repertoire of like how you move and like I guess your movement journey.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Completely.
And then they inform each other, of course, too, right?
Mhm.
Because it's like
Mhm.
you get more exposure to that.
Mhm.
Any fun or unique stories that you have on dance or any memorable moments, I guess, being on choreos or anything else in dance?
I think. I mean, one of the biggest stories everyone asks is like, oh, like why did you audition for choreos? And I think
Mm,
we've talked about this before. And shout out to Genesis for having me audition. And I think that was also something that I learned is this just taking the step. Just even if you feel like you're not going to be able to make it or you're worried about like the outcome, the worst that happens is that it just doesn't happen,
yeah.
right? I think you need to take that leap. If you're curious, if you have even an inclination or a like that you might enjoy this, I think taking that step to do it, audition, um, that's kind of like one of the biggest things. And so I auditioned because he was auditioning.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I remember telling myself too, and I would tell myself, if I could go back, I would say, don't think like that. But
Yeah.
I told myself, oh, if Genesis makes it and you don't, it's
Yeah.
okay. You didn't mean to even audition. I remember thinking that. And I told
Yeah.
myself that literally as I was standing in the four and I'm
Mhm.
about to do like the audition, right? But I was like, but you know what? Enjoy, because even if you don't make it, at least you enjoy this performance. And
Yeah.
then it ended up working out. And then it led to like this however many year long
Mhm.
journey of being on choreos. But yeah, I always tell people, I'm like, just take the shot,
Yeah.
just go for it.
I like that. So legend has it that during Jesse's audition year, there were hundreds, if not thousands, of people who auditioned, and it was just Genesis and Jesse who made it onto the team. There was like a few hundred, right? It was like 200, 300
I
people,
think it was like
something like
200
that.
plus. Yeah.
Yeah, so which is a huge amount. That was like peak choreo's like interest,
Mm-hmm.
and so having two people make it is pretty crazy because our classes are anywhere from 6 to let's say 12 people per season or per like quarter. So being two out of like a couple hundred is pretty crazy. And I remember asking Ellen, who might be on the show in the future, I was like, so why did you only take Jesse and Genesis? And she's
Mm-hmm.
like, to be honest, there is no one else that good. Like everyone else is okay,
Mm-hmm.
but those two stood out like instantly and like
Mm.
significantly. So there
Oh.
was no choice but to take them too.
Uh-huh.
That sort of thing. I was
I've
like,
never
okay,
asked her, so it's kind of
that's what
cool
she
to
told
see.
me. So I don't know. We'll see when I interview her.
Yeah,
I'll
yeah,
I'll,
yeah.
I'll like fact check that. Like,
Uh-huh.
did you really say that? Like, but yeah. So it's pretty crazy. Testament to Jesse's dancing, and I guess the level of talent. Okay, so moving on to next topic. I think this one is kind of like discipline, consistency, adaptation, motivation, and this is one of the topics that you said you wanted to talk about. And I
Mm-hmm.
think obviously it's a recurring theme in your life.
Mm-hmm.
We might have touched upon this, but what do you think are the necessary factors or elements that allow you to perform at such a high level to be part of like Team USA Karate or anything?
One of the things that I learned, especially more recently, um, is that consistent efforts rather than feelings of motivation get you further. Because I feel like motivation, you see all these motivational talks, and it's always great, right? Inspiring stories, and that's like your first step in the door, like first foot in the door, right? And but I feel like motivation is fleeting because you wake up, you're a little more sore, a little more tired. Do I really want to go to training today? I can just maybe skip today and go tomorrow and make it up tomorrow. But you know that usually if you postpone it, that next day might go to the next day and
Yeah.
then to the next day. But if you just consistently go in, even if you don't feel 100%, you operate at your 70% as your 100%, putting that effort in um, leads to a better outcome. And don't let like inner feelings of just like, oh yeah, I feel motivated today. Of course, that's always great because then you have a great session too. But I think consistent efforts, consistent planning leads to a better outcome. And that's especially now when you have so many things that you're juggling in life, especially full time adulting and stuff like that. I think it's those consistent planning that helps.
Yeah, like so
Yeah.
not relying on your emotions or inspiration to get you through the door.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any sort of routines or practices or habits that allowed you to get to the level where you are today? And like, how did you incorporate them into your life? I can imagine consistent training,
Mm-hmm.
mentorship, and the commitment to being at your dojo and being surrounded by that. But are there any other sort of routines or practices that you feel like helps you a lot, and or people
Mm-hmm.
could take away and implement to their own lives?
I think adaptability, because I think it's always important to plan, of course, because if you fail to plan, then you plan to fail, kind of thing, is one of the things I always kind of grew up hearing. But at the same time, you have to have a plan, but be adaptable. So if things don't work out, you don't feel like it's still like a failure that you couldn't hit all of the objectives of that training. Like you still were able to hit like two out of the five, but those two were really good. So I think having that ability to kind of go with the flow and still try to do your best. I think that works with like all aspects of life too, because you can like have a schedule, but if things like, oh, this actually clashes, let me try to reverse it and then still make it work out rather than just abandoning the idea completely.
Mm,
So I think adaptability.
yeah.
Yeah.
So be like water, my friend.
Yes, exactly.
um, Are there any integral lessons that you've learned from your teachers, mentors, coaches? Like something that stands out to you? Maybe we've mentioned it already, but anything that
hmm
comes to mind?
I kind of touched on this, but again, making that plan, but also just being able to react to whatever changes happen.
Mm,
I think what my sensei usually says is that life isn't about what happens to you, but how you react to it. And so, again, you can make your plan, but if you react well to whatever changes happen, then you can still have a successful outcome.
mm. I will say I love that this episode is like a bunch of like mic drop like life quotes.
Yeah.
So I think people really will really like this. Like, wait, what'd she just say? Rewind. Ah, that
Yeah.
was good. That was good.
I have to make sure I say them correctly
Yeah,
too.
yeah. I was reading this book recently. I think it's called like Same as Ever by Morgan Housel. It's a personal finance book, but obviously
hmm
there's some personal development in there.
hmm
And they said that like stories leverage ideas the way that like I guess like housing or finances leverage debt or something like that, but also that sentences are more memorable than stories or books, meaning like the phrase.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes you can read a whole book, but the one sentence will stand out to someone and that makes the impact. So I think
hmm
that's, I guess, speaking to the value of like those bite size, like, oh, that was a good quote. Like that was a
Yeah.
good
Yeah.
idea to latch onto.
hmm
Um, so I guess, again, we also probably talked about this, but like, how does one stay motivated in such a high stakes, high competition environment? The follow-ups there is like what holds people back and how does one get out of their own head? I think that's something that you would be very familiar with your journey.
Mm-hmm. Kind of like a similar theme, like motivation sometimes just only goes so far. So making those consistent efforts to hit your objectives, whatever they may be, even if you hit like 3 sessions, but they were just okay sessions, but you still hit those 3 sessions. If you maybe take that day off, it might be kind of like playing at the back of your head, oh, I skipped that one day. What if I don't perform as well as I do? So sometimes just having that as like your backup
I
or
see.
kind of like something to fall back on if you start to have any things like any like anxiety that creeps up during competition, like, oh, am I really actually prepared? And then you think back, no, I went to
I did
every
the
session.
work,
I
yeah.
did the work. I put the work in. And that's another mic drop kind of sentence. You get what you put in, right? And so if you check all the boxes, you know that you did your best in every session as you mentally or physically were capable of, then you know that you did the best you possibly could have. And so I think that's something that I'm trying to work on a little bit more because I do think that I tend to get in my own head very easily. It's because the way that my sport works, especially as a kata athlete, it's like a sole performance. So it's like all on me to make sure I perform at my best. There's
Mm-hmm.
no like reaction to someone punching you in the face
Mm-hmm.
and you're trying to like, you just get nailed.
Yeah.
But this is like, no, I'm in control of my rhythm, my speed, my power, and my own performance. And then at that point, it's in the hand of the judges. But I just try to not spin myself around essentially and just kind of remember like, okay, you put in the efforts, you made the right choices, you did all of the things, right? And so that allows me to like kind of reset myself and being like, well, whatever happens happens. You did your best. You're going to try to perform your best right now. Um I also really believe in like positive self-talk.
Mm-hmm.
So and this is something that I feel like I actually kind of strayed away from. I think I did it more in like when I was in high school and then I kind of fell off from doing it like maybe the past 3 years or so. And then I remember I was watching the Olympics and Suni Lee, like she was
The
caught on
gymnast, right?
camera. Yeah, the
Yeah.
gymnast, right? She just came back from like chronic kidney disease.
Oh,
And like
crazy.
she's just like competing at the Olympics.
Yeah.
There were days that she was just like not wanting to show up. She has like a bucket next to her at
Oh my
practice
God.
because sorry, a little gross, but
Yeah. Yeah.
but but that story like just like hit like it just like hit my heart so much because I was just like, but she showed up.
Mm.
She did what she could. She competed as best as she could, and then there she was, medalist, Olympic medalist again. And I just saw her saying things, and I don't know what the exact. I'm terrible at reading lips, but
Yeah.
she was like saying, "Like you got this. This is for you.
Yeah.
Let's do this." And I was like, I need to do that more. And so I feel like I have better performances when I have positive self talk because if you can convince yourself first, then you can convince others. If you can't
Mm.
even convince yourself, then you're already kind of starting like 1 foot behind. So, yeah.
Wow. I love that. Um, okay. I think that answers my question. Like, what holds people back and how do you get out of your own head? And like you said, falling back. There's that one quote. What was it like? Like it ends with you fall to the level of your training. Do you know what I'm talking about? Where it's like you don't like aspire to like your greatest performance. I'm paraphrasing, right? But
Mm-hmm.
it's actually like it's the level of your training that what you should expect.
Mm-hmm.
The quote is a lot simpler than
Yeah,
that,
yeah,
but
yeah.
I
Uh-huh.
don't know if that makes sense. But yeah, it reminds me of that because if you show up, you do the work and the
Mm-hmm.
affirmations and whatnot. Your training is what's going to hold you up, and not like
Mm-hmm.
you aspiring to do 10 times better than you normally do,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a good testament to that.
Yeah, like you want to just keep elevating your training performance so that like even if you felt like 50% that day, you can operate at 50% and still
Mhm.
do this amount of good work.
Right.
And so just learning to again adapt to whatever level you have, whether it's physical or mental capacity, you can kind of change. So
Mm. Thank you, Solomon. So yeah, we don't rise to the level of our expectations. We fall to the level of our training. Perfect. Way better than what I said.
uh-huh.
Thank you.
Yes.
Quote attributed to Navy SEAL.
Nice, nice.
Nice. All right. So last topic, and we can pivot. I mean, this is kind of the same vein,
Mm-hmm.
but like establishing meaningful and inspiring connections. You mentioned that as one of the topics you wanted to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Could you define what a meaningful and inspiring connection is?
I kind of grew up with hearing that you are your closest 5 friends. And so I think it's easy to pick up those 5 closest people to you, like your mannerisms, those habits, those ways of thinking. So it's important to kind of be in a sphere that has the same like minded, kind of like,
That has the values that you're looking for, at least.
yeah, at least
Yeah.
the same values, right?
Mhm.
And it doesn't necessarily have to be in the exact same field, although that does help. I do think like I have spheres of obviously like karate, dance, and PT. And then within that realm, I want to feel some kind of level of inspiration that will kind of kickstart me and make me want to be a better version of myself, even if it's 1%. And maybe they're just like, oh, I'm really good with my like diet. I'm really good with my routine, like afterwards, my cool down. You know what? Yeah, I want to do that too. Like just little things like that that make you want to be a better version of yourself. Yeah. And I also think that of course there's meaningful and inspiring relationships, but I also think that just people who can elevate you in any way to help you recharge your soul or your heart or your mind, those are also really important too.
I like
Yeah.
that. So then, how does one like approach developing those relationships and or finding them? And I guess you might have touched on like what is the importance of it, because obviously it feeds your soul,
Mhm.
it inspires you to be your best self. But how does one like develop those or find those sort of relationships?
think when you're already like in those sphere, of course, when you're doing like the initial conversations, it's natural to feel like a little nervous when you're getting to know somebody. It's like you don't usually think about, you don't want to say the wrong thing. You want to make sure you make a good impression. But I think there's that natural click that you feel too, right? And honestly, I felt that like when I first met you at the auditions too. And I was like, oh man, this guy's like cool.
Mm,
Like I like the way he thinks and how he approaches dance. So it's just, you kind of feel like that instant connection on some level, right? But I think the way I go about wanting to develop that friendship or that like companionship, I think it's, do I feel comfortable around them? Do I feel like they're adding stress to my life, or are they adding like comfort? Are they adding some level of self improvement, or I just feel really down when I'm with them? Like, I think thinking about how I feel afterwards too kind of gauge, like allows me to gauge like, oh, this person is going to be like good for my life. Like I don't want to always be surrounded by like negativity. I want to have some level of like positivity, but also of course like you want to be realistic as well. So kind of like using those as kind of like gauging aspects.
yeah.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. It kind of reminds me of, you know, the intentional introspection reflection of how these people affect you
Mhm.
that maybe most people don't do is like, why do I feel this way? But then if you kind of dig deeper, you're like, oh, I know why, because of the thing that I was doing today, the people that I'm around consistently, and
Mhm.
then these
Mhm.
people make me feel this way versus these people make me feel this way. And
Mhm.
it reminds me of kind of like diet and food.
Mhm.
If people kind of take the time to reflect on how certain foods make them feel, they
Mhm.
can more adequately choose the types of foods and diets and whatever that
Mhm.
could best serve them and their health and their
Yeah,
like energy
totally.
levels.
Mhm.
But when you kind of just mindlessly eat, it's kind of like you just mindlessly be around people. And
Mhm.
I think that's like just as important, right?
Yeah, totally. I actually really like that
Mm,
analogy.
mm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's a weird tangent. There's I read this book or this podcast or whatever, but
Mhm.
this guy like he was studying abroad in like let's say UK, and he was like on a budget, so he had to choose specific foods to eat because he didn't have a lot to spend. But to be
Mm.
efficient with how he spent his money, he made a chart of A, B, and C of which
Mhm.
foods made him feel amazing, like A,
Mhm.
like okay, B, and meh C. And then over time, he started to cut out the C and B foods and only focused on the A foods. So, for
Oh.
example, one of the weird examples was like green apples was an A. He's like, I don't know why, but I feel always great when I do like green apples.
Mhm.
So then by the end of his like study abroad in the UK, he was eating all these A foods, and I think he was an athlete and he lost a lot of muscle mass because he wasn't really like training a lot.
Mhm.
But when he went back home, he had insane stamina and strength that was
Oh.
like he could just keep going for his workouts, and he was lifting as heavy as he was before, but he was like
Mhm.
way skinnier.
Oh,
And so
wow.
he said he wasn't able to replicate these results, but he's like,
Mhm.
I don't know what, but I think it was that weird process I have with my diet
Mhm.
that allowed my body to thrive. So when I came back, I was at, if not exceeded my old like performance levels.
Mhm.
And so I think about that, you know, it's an anecdotal example,
Mhm.
but I think about that when I eat food. I'm like, okay, really pay attention to how these foods make me feel.
Yeah.
And like your example, how these people make me feel. Because
Mhm.
if you want to optimize your life and your energy, you
Mhm.
should be more intentional with how you spend
Right.
your time.
Definitely. And I think you and I have also talked about this before in past conversations about being an introvert versus being an extrovert. And sometimes taking that extra step to connect with people
Mm,
takes a little bit more effort as an introvert.
yeah,
So if I am going to take that extra energy to try to make that connection, I want it to be
of
a good
course.
connection.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
a good time well spent and whatnot.
Mhm. Mhm.
I like that. All right. Any I know, I think that covers pretty much all of it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's good. Guys,
Mhm.
rewind those parts. It's a lot of bang for your buck. So, you ready for rapid fire questions?
I actually, I'll just add
Sure.
something real quick,
Yeah.
just to that, because I feel like I didn't always have the best gauge before, and it wasn't until, and I think it'll probably end up going into like one of the rapid fire
Yeah.
questions, but
Yeah.
I had been in a more like toxic environment, but I wasn't aware of it at the
Oh, I
time.
see. I see.
So I did it because like I was in that environment because I was doing better in my sport, but then I wasn't realize how damaging it was to like my own mental health
Mhm.
and like my own like heart and how I felt. Because I was like, okay, I felt great physically every time I left a training, but why do I feel so drained at the same time? Not like physically, but like mentally
Yeah.
drained. And I just didn't feel myself whenever I was there. Like, yeah, I was getting great results and I was, doing better in general, just like physically, but I had to like, it took a few years even, and it was a process, but I learned that, okay, this isn't the right environment for me. This isn't the right people. I still thank them for the like what they added into my life and like the progress I made with them. But as soon as I like removed myself from that situation, I learned that I was a lot happier outside of that. Okay, results don't come as consistently as they did before. I understand that, but I'm also so much more at peace with myself. So sometimes it takes time to understand like your own gauge of how you feel with people. So don't feel like I feel like people shouldn't feel like it's a rush process because sometimes you have to learn how to understand your own feelings and process them before you even can analyze how you feel with other people too.
Mm,
So it did take some time, but that's why I really do emphasize and I'm a lot more intentional with like who I surround myself with
mm.
too. So yeah.
Nice. Thank you for sharing that. I think
Yeah.
that's really impactful. Is like you said, I think self-awareness is a lifelong process,
Mhm.
journey.
Mhm.
So you might not have that full level of self-awareness out the gate, but
Mhm.
as long as you're intentional with developing that,
Yeah.
and then that'll serve you for like what you choose to do and who you choose to surround yourself with.
Mhm. Yeah.
Nice. Cool. All right. Rapid
Yeah.
fire now.
Okay, let's
Yeah.
go.
There's a lot of leeway in this. So like we could
Yeah.
touch on anything that we might have missed in rapid fire.
Mhm. Mhm.
All right. First question is if you could put a sign up for millions of people to see, what would it say?
Be your own biggest fan.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I think a lot of times we're our own worst critic. And
So
I
true.
think, I think we talked about this when we were doing the Koreos fundraising,
Yeah.
right? And so I think in order for you to get people behind you to be your supporters, you have to be your biggest supporter first because nobody's going to want to root for you if you're not rooting for yourself. So be your own biggest fan, not your worst critic.
Nice. I love it. All right. What is one of the hardest challenges you faced in your life, and what did you learn from it?
I feel like there's a few things, and I feel like in like the trifecta of my life, there's like one in everything.
Ah.
But I think one of them in terms of like karate was trying to go for the leap of attempting the Olympic journey
Mm,
because I was getting a lot of people saying that, oh, you're never going to make it. You're not going to go very far. It's just going to be a waste of money, resources, time. But I knew it was an experience I wanted to have for myself. So, with the right voices, with the right support, I was able to chase it. So, I think during that whole time where I was like trying to decide if I wanted to do it, it was like hard because there were so many things that were kind of like juggling. Oh, am I going to take a break after undergrad to chase this dream and then apply for PT school after? Or am I going to try to do this while I'm still in my last year of undergrad? Like there was a lot of scheduling, a lot of logistics. How am I going to do this like with school, with money and all that kind of stuff? Because our sport isn't funded.
mm,
Everything's out of pocket. So, okay, we got to adjust finances this way. So I think that was probably the hardest challenge leading up to the preparation of even attempting the journey
mm.
and just giving myself that, okay, let's go for it kind of okay to go. Yeah.
Self-inflicted wounds. So do you have a story about something that's gone wrong in your life that is your own fault and you can't blame anyone because you did it to yourself?
Yes, this one was I was thinking about this one a
Yeah.
lot. And I could even revert back to even last year. So last year, or no, let me rewind. 2 years ago, I made my first senior continental finals. And I've made it before as a junior, but it was my first senior one. So it was a big deal. And it was going to be an All American final. And so my teammate had gone first, I got second, but just making to that final was like a big mark in my career. And so I had a lot of self imposed expectations I was putting on myself coming into last year's Pan American Championships. And I think that's also another reason why I was thinking more about like the positive self talk a lot as I reflected on not making it to finals last year. It was really hard because I was thinking about all of these things of like not making it. What happens if I'm the only person who doesn't make it to finals? What if I perform terribly? But it's like I did the work. I should not be in my head. And I knew it was thoughts that I shouldn't have been having, but I just kept ruminating on it. And I just kept like going back to it every second I had that entire week leading up to the event. And I really have nothing to no one to blame but myself because I just knew that I was doing it, but I didn't stop myself from doing it, even though I knew how to stop myself. So I guess there's that. Yeah.
It's like getting in your own head.
Mm-hmm.
If you could redo one thing, what would you do differently?
Hmm. I feel like every decision I've made and everything I've done has led me to where I am. So it's a little hard to answer that,
Yeah.
but I guess The one thing I would say is start competing in the senior division sooner.
Oh,
I
okay.
would have liked to have started doing that sooner. One of my USA teammates at the time, she was starting to do these international events called Premier Leagues. And I remember she invited me back in like 2016 or something like that. And I was just starting to really make my way into the senior team. And she was like, "Oh, you should start doing these events. Like it'll be good exposure for you." But I told myself, "Nah, like I don't feel ready. I don't think I should do it. Like it just waste time, waste money kind of thing." And I would probably tell my younger self, like, just do it. You're gonna thank yourself later for the extra experience. But I think everything led up to where I am today, that big jump in like, okay, we're gonna compete every single month, like twice a month. And so like that led me to my level right now. But there is a part of me that's like, just go compete sooner.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
hmm
If you could give your younger self advice, what would it be now? Any age, any time period?
Take the leap.
Yeah.
So kind of like the previous
Same thing.
question,
Yeah.
I think just don't worry about what other people are going to say or what other people think. Just do what you feel the natural inclination and pull to do. Um, People are going to say whatever they want to say, and they're going to continue to think it even if you say all the right things. So just do what you want to do if you feel like it's the right thing, like the right
Yeah.
thing. Yeah.
If you want to dance to Girls' Generation, you just do it.
You just do
You
it.
just do
Yeah,
it. You just do
exactly.
it.
Don't do what the haters say.
In the last few years, what new belief, behavior, or habit has improved your life?
Mm, I think the billboard sign,
Yeah.
it's like be your own biggest fan because I tend to be too self-critical. So if I can continue to, of course, you need to have a balance. You can't just hype yourself up all the time when you don't do the work, but make sure that you celebrate your little wins, even if they don't feel like a lot, because you need to like pump yourself up sometimes too.
Mm,
Yeah. Yeah.
cool. I like that. Who would you call successful, and how do you define success?
So I would say that success is being able to pursue what makes you happy and what makes you feel fulfilled in life. And so I would say that someone who's really successful that I look up to and who's like my coach and my friend is an athlete called Grace Lau. And I think that she's also voiced to me before the different like mental aspects of trying to be at the top, maintain at the top, or chase to be at the top. And sometimes that chase makes it very stressful, and finding joy in what we do still and bringing that back to like why you started that passion in the first place. So success is being able to pursue it with happiness at the same time. Yeah.
Nice. I like that. If you knew you couldn't fail, what would you be trying, or what would you be doing right now?
I would love to have my own YouTube channel.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like
On what?
I just one of the things that I do love taking is like just like cinematic like photography or videography. I just like looking at a sky and be like, "Wow, this is really pretty." And because I travel, of course, I've seen like travel vlogs and those kinds of things, and I would love to do something like that.
Yeah.
But I think it's just more of a time commitment that I
Course.
just don't have, and I don't have the most technical computer skills.
Yeah.
So I definitely think I would need to learn that. But I would love to have like my own YouTube channel where I do a little bit more of like both karate and dance. Maybe do some like more dance covers on that channel too, but also doing like some like karate vlogs or maybe some PT advice. Make it like about like my 3 pillars of life too. Yeah.
Nice. I like that.
Yeah.
I feel like most people kind of, well, a lot of people I talk to, like they would like to have some sort of thing like that where they can just share their life, their journey, and whatever aspects there might be. I think that speaks a lot to like people's desire for like the expression and the sharing and connecting with people. So I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Um, what is one of the best or most worthwhile investments you've ever made in either time, money, energy, etc.?
Yeah, mental health and physical health. I think often because we're so busy like treating our own patients and like we have so many other things juggling in life, sometimes we as physical therapists don't address our own needs. And so like some of my like leads at the clinic, they have kids that they take care of and then they have their own like, "Oh yeah, my hip hurts today." But, "Oh well, I got to go
Yeah,
see my next
whatever.
patient,"
Yeah.
kind of thing. And so that plays even more because I'm also an athlete that's actively like still training and I'm also competing and working. So I have to really make sure that I'm like, okay, I need to stop ignoring this and just kind of doing enough to just placate it. I
Yeah,
need to
just get
actually
by.
like invest a little bit more time, get more recovery tools also, and kind of practice what I preach to my patients as well.
Mm,
So yeah.
I like that. I guess on that note, what is a favorite recent purchase that you've made in
Mhm.
around the $50 to $100 range? We can change that parameters, but anything come to mind?
Yeah, so there's this thing called a psoas tool. It like
Mm,
literally it looks like the little hook
yeah.
thing. Yeah. And at first I remember trying it out maybe a few years back and I was like, this is a torture device. Like this really doesn't feel great at all, you know? And I just didn't think about it at the time. And I came back to it because I was just like having like a lot of like hip flexor issues and
Mm,
we just like sit all the time. So naturally like this muscle gets like shortened over
yeah, yeah,
time.
yeah.
And so I was like, wait, I remember trying
Yeah.
something that didn't feel good, and so I just, like, got it off Amazon. I was like, "Okay, if I really don't like it, free returns, right?"
Mm,
But, I got it, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is, like, the best thing ever," and, like, you kinda, like, live in that, like, "Oh, it hurts so good," kind of
mm,
thing. So now it, like, travels with me, like, to every tournament. I, like, recommend it to a lot of, like, my younger athlete patients because usually this muscle is just sitting in a shortened position, it's weak, and tends to lead to a lot of, like, injuries, like, lower down in the chain,
mm,
so it's honestly one of, like, the best investments that I've bought recently.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do have one of those too, like a
Mhm.
psoas release sort of thing.
Mhm.
What kind of injuries does that is that related to? I guess you said like hip like tightness or something, but
Mhm.
what else does that like address?
So usually because a lot of people usually have desk jobs or
Yeah.
just are sitting a lot, whether it's like watching TV, computer work, those kinds of things. Because of that, naturally, this like front hip muscle shortens, and
Yeah.
when it's not in its ideal length, it also weakens over time.
Mm,
So when we do things like squatting to get out of a deep position, or like running across the street to catch a red light or something like
yeah.
that muscle ends up going at a longer length than it's used to, and it's not as strong. And
Mm,
sometimes that also, if this chain in the front isn't working well, then it actually affects your lower back. So a lot of times my lower back
mm,
patients, I'm like, okay, we need to address the
yeah,
front
yeah,
too. It's
yeah.
not just always your back.
Right.
So it kind of addresses both aspects. Yeah.
Okay, that's very helpful for me personally because I do have a lot of lower back pain, and
Yeah. So
so that makes a lot of sense.
yeah.
Okay, and so last rapid fire question: any favorite books, movies, videos, articles, media, or anything else that you recommend or share the most?
Yes. So I've also been reading a lot more recently too. And this one is kind of like fantasy magical realism,
Mhm.
but it's called The Lantern of Memories, A Lantern of Lost Memories.
Okay.
And so I recently had lost both of my grandmothers in the past 2 years. And so I just found this book and I was like, oh, it's kind of talking about grief, but it also kind of like navigated its way about like life purpose and then how we reflect on the life we've lived. And then you often forget like the little things that make you happy in life too. And then it's just kind of like, oh, I think I should reflect more on those little moments in life and kind of like show gratitude towards those moments. So I was like really thankful. I'm not going to give any spoilers because in
Yeah.
case people read it, but I definitely recommend that book. A song that I really like and would recommend is by Kat Burns. I think it's Live More, Love More, might be reversed, but something
Mm,
like that. And that song really spoke to me. It was just on Instagram and it was real. And I was like, rewind this real quick. And it was talking about if there's someone you want to speak to, just go ahead, speak to them. If there's something you're interested in, go for it. And it was literally like things that usually hold me back.
mm,
And I'm like, you're so right. And I was like,
mhm.
this song is great. And so I like to listen to it a lot, just when I have like that downtime to just kind of like reset myself. But of course, it's just a good song too. But
Mm.
it just had like a lot of things that I resonate with. So I liked that a lot. And movie. So this is my favorite movie, and it's one of like my comfort movies. It's called 100 Foot Journey, and it's about this family that kind of emigrates to Europe, and this like cook. He only cooks in like Indian food, right? And but he wants to venture into French food, and it's kind of this journey that he takes along to kind of like discover who he could be without limiting his potential.
Mm.
And again, I just kind of like things along that kind
Yeah.
of like that idea. So I think it's also just a really beautifully shot movie. Like I think it's just I love watching the cooking scenes
Mhm.
too, but I think the underlying theme is just really just is a great self-discovery movie too.
Yeah.
So
I like
that's
it.
yeah.
Cool. Nice. I'll
Yeah.
put those in the show notes.
Mhm.
All right. think that's it for rapid fire questions.
Mhm.
So, ending questions, I like to end with gratitude. Shout out to my mom. She likes to hear that when I give her a shout out. She's like,
Yeah.
she listens to all my episodes. She's like, oh, I love it when you say that. I'm like, I know, mom, I know. But yeah, so Jesse, what are you grateful for?
Grateful for my parents, most definitely. So shout out to my parents, my mom and my dad, because literally without them being so supportive, like chasing one dream, I'm chasing three dreams, at the
Mm,
same time. And they just always are like, you know what, as long as you want to do it, we'll be here for you. And so I'm always thankful for that. And again, my family always says like, God's with you. If he has a plan for you, he'll take care of you. He put these things in your heart for a reason. So go ahead and chase it. Everything will kind of follow, right? And so I'm really thankful to God for giving me the life that I have, giving me these passions that he planted in my heart, and of course the family to help support me in that.
nice.
And also just my friends and teammates in general too that just like kind of like support my ambitions too. Like I know it's not hard to have a friend who's always so busy, and
Yeah.
I'm always so grateful that I have friends that are really understanding about what I do. It's always funny because they're like, "Hey, are you in the country? Like, can you come to this one event?"
Yeah.
That's always the phrasing that you
Yeah.
don't really hear very often. But I'm always grateful that they understand. Like, oh, I have to leave early, or I can't make it. Sorry, I have training. But they're always like thinking of me, and they still invite me to things, which makes me
Mhm.
feel like okay, they still think of me and
Yeah.
stuff like that. So, yeah,
That's nice.
yeah.
I love it. All right. Any final ask or final takeaways that you'd like to have from or that you like the audience to have from the show, or any
Mhm.
asks you want to give or ask from the audience?
Mm. I ask the audience to just pursue what makes you happy. Yeah, I think if you can chase whatever you like and whatever you even think you might like,
Mhm.
then you're gonna live a much happier life as well. So
Mm.
don't feel the regrets later on of like having the what ifs. Just know and just go for it. Just go for the dive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. I like it. All right, Jesse. Where can people find you if they want to check out what you're up to or connect or anything like that?
Yeah. Most of the time, most of my training videos or Instagram is like Instagram, like
Mm.
is where you get most of like my training updates or competition updates. So that's
Nice.
JESSIXJJ, and you'll see it on the screen probably.
There you
And
go.
then I also have Twitter. I use that a lot. Less Twitter. It's called X now.
Mhm.
Yeah, you find me on X Threads occasionally as well. Yeah, that's where you'll find me.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right, Jesse. Thank you so much for being
Yeah.
here.
Thank you for having
Yeah,
me.
it's been a great conversation. I learned a lot. I will be listening to this several times.
Yes.
So it's really good. So thank you again for being here.
Mhm.
And for my final sign off to my audience, thank you guys for tuning in and listening. Always reminder to be kind to others, especially yourself.
Mhm.
And you can always learn something from someone if you just take the time to listen. So thank you guys for being here.